on my TV. Hanging with Diasporans is a bold and interactive program where Diasporans ask important questions, share real experiences, discuss governance, culture, migration, family, business, and practical solutions for a better society.
Good evening and welcome to another exciting episode of Hanging with Diasporans, where we bring together Nigerians at home and abroad to have honest conversation about issues shaping our nation's future. I'm your host, Folajogun Akilami, and tonight we are discussing a subject that affects every Nigerian family, and that is education. According to UNESCO, more than 120,000 Nigerian students are currently studying abroad, a number that has steadily increased over the past decade. While many seek world-class education overseas, an important question remains: is Nigeria's education system preparing students to compete, innovate, and lead on the global stage, or are we falling behind? Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Olusola Akinbo to Hanging with Diasporans. Joining him on the show is Dr. Adeiza Isiaka, an accomplished academic and applied linguistics researcher who currently teaches at the University of Ontario, Canada, after previously teaching in the University of Toronto. He is an internationally recognized scholar and fellow of Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, the Alfred Koop Foundation, and the American Council of Learned Society, ACLS. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Adeiza Isiaka to Hanging with Diasporans. Thank you both for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on Hanging with Diasporans. We appreciate your time and look forward to drawing from your wealth of knowledge and international experience. Now let's get into tonight's big issue.
Right for hanging with the Diasporans on Fola Yoga de Kilamin TV. Hanging with the Diasporans, a bold and interactive program where the Diasporans ask him.
Mr. Adeiza, you studied in Nigeria and abroad. Looking back, how well did your Nigeria education prepare you for studying overseas? And that question might still have to go back to Mr. Akinbo, but I'd like to know, as a foundation, let's just start with that.
Yes, thank you very much. I think, like every other person who had a background in Nigeria before traveling abroad, the foundational components of education is something you received in Nigeria, but as to how well it prepared me for further studies abroad, to a degree, and I would be specific, in terms of resilience, I think the ecology of the Nigerian education system prepares you to be resilient, to be mentally prepared. Knowledge acquisition is pretty rigorous, and I think the ambience of the Nigerian education system prepares you for that psychological strength to go through things. But in terms of cognitive preparedness, and I'm sure that everyone else would say that when you arrive in the West, you would have to reinvent yourself in order to succeed, which means that you're most likely not to have the adequate education that transitions you seamlessly into the Western framework. Yes.
All right. Some questions to you, Mr. Akinbo. How well did your Nigerian education or the background prepare you for study abroad?
Okay, thank you so much for that. I think I'll toe the line of Adeiza as well, and that's because from my personal, experience, while I was in school in Nigeria here, I could read under different, conditions. You didn't, electricity, sometimes you are ready to go all out. You find a way to read and all of that. But I would say, yes, the resilience, like you mentioned, was there. And I was prepared for that, the toughness. But I had a shocker of my life when I got into econometric class, and we were given an assignment. I just picked the questions, and this is statistics and all of that. Answer the questions, like an assignment, normal, prepared it and submitted, only for the scores to come out, and I was dumbfounded. What? How on earth did I score this low?
Such as you.
For someone like me, in fact, I will tell you, I more or less like cried, because I walked straight to the office of the professor to say, why did I score this? I don't know why. I answered the question straight up. But believe me, the questions that was given and the answers expected would be to be like a life thing, that you tell a story as you are answering the question. It's not for you to just say 1 + 1 = 2. It's to explain the theory. Explain the theory behind this. This is so person wrote this about this, explained on this paper, according to this and this. So I'm using this method and this. I was like, what? I never, and that is the thing. So, because, typically in Nigerian universities, a lecturer gives you an assignment. You see students who answer, what is a noun? The students are writing, a noun is a name of a person, animal, place, or blah, 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 blah. And everybody answers the question. But to answer that in the West, you want, because that is not coming from your head, it's academic. You now want to make researches. You have to pick that so person wrote on this to describe this, to mean this. Another person wrote on this perspective. And as a result of this, I think that, you are now forming an opinion of yours. This is my perspective on this. So I was not prepared. And and in the same course, I failed that assignment, say. And the subsequent one, by the time I picked the next one, I had to recover. I had to recover the lost ground.
I use the word genius for you because I didn't do that once.
No, I did it once, and
I struggled. I struggled because the reason I struggled was because in Nigeria you are told not to copy.
That's
research.
True.
Why am I copying? Yeah. It's research here. So the disparity is just like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
All right, then. When we talk about global relevance, Adeiza, I'm coming to you now. What does that really mean in today's educational landscape? Global relevance.
Well, so to begin, I think the world itself has become a global village. So there is this transnational interaction between humans across boundaries, national boundaries. So what that requires is whatever education you're getting, regardless where you're getting it, should equip you to function anywhere in the world. So that would require that we align with some other countries, regardless of what countries they are, in terms of curriculum and the intensity of exposure to knowledge. If you want to study in Lagos and work in Toronto or Vancouver or any other part of the world, or even teach at Harvard, so you would certainly have to, you would need to have the kind of education that makes you functional, or that prepares you for the job that you would do, regardless of where you're doing that. So I think that is that. But we should also think of what innovation is from a very global lens. Because, if you have a subjective definition of innovation, you could consider yourself to have acquired skills And then you arrive in some other spaces and you find that your skills are obsolete. And again, that takes me back to what I mentioned earlier, which is reinventing yourself. For one, I don't know if we're allowed to talk about ourselves. I I'd studied in Nigeria. My first and second degree were in Nigeria. When I arrived in Canada, I had taught at a Nigerian university for about for a few years, and then I arrived at University of Toronto. That's supposedly the best university in Canada. It took a while to even understand the gaping gap between the style and the quality of teaching. And it's not just about the contents now that you teach, but also the culture of pedagogy. All of that had to be learned all over again. But here is a guy who had degrees that supposedly prepared him to teach, and I had also taught for a few years back in Nigeria. So it required a lot of humility, agreeing that you need to relearn and unlearn. So yes, and again, at the risk of sounding disparaging, I don't think that the quality of education that I received back home indeed prepared me 100% for the challenges that I had to face here.
What would you say is actually missing?
It's interesting. The question is interesting in the sense that permit me to use real work experience to this. And I found out something interesting because I studied accounting in Nigeria, and I went to Germany to study eventually financial services management, which comprises of financial institutions. So I'm dealing with the stock market, I'm dealing with asset management companies, dealing with insurance companies, and all of that. Yes, I had years of experience in banking, and I got to class and we were talking. My experience did count a lot as per work experience. And, I studied accounting. The courses we're doing around, accounting related were still the same because, you will see that these things are principles that are global principles. But I found something interestingly different in the sense that while you are in Nigeria, or while I'm in Nigeria, I was in Nigeria, the course that I studied, the work or the things and the way I learned in school, I couldn't connect them directly to the work I was doing. I couldn't. But I noticed something different in the approach in the school that I attended in Germany. That's because each of the courses we were doing, there was the practical link to the society. There was a practical link to, so I had to visit a bank, a Commerzbank, if I remember. I visited Commerzbank. We discussed, banking activities. We discussed how the topics we were doing in class related to what they were doing on the job. And I remember visiting EY, one of the big four in Luxembourg, and that's an asset management, a consulting firm. And we had to talk about performance management, how do you performance fee and all of that discussion. And that was something we were discussing in class, but, you learning it from those that are really practicing it. And much more than that, we did something interestingly in one of the classes. And that class had a simulation that you have to simulate a bank, and students will have to own the bank. You have to take decision as the bank owner, as the bank's MD, as a treasury. You assign yourselves into different positions. We did that. That is for banking. We had something that had to do with, stock market. A certain amount, we were all in groups, from the beginning of the semester. that you have certain amount, you now have to trade on the stock market, make decisions as per asset allocation, that these are the shares, okay, I'm going into this geography because of this, and you document, this is why I am doing this is why I'm taking these. Then you now, at the end of that period, to assess and look at it at A, who is the best team? That means you must have taken decisions, you must have bought shares, and eventually your portfolio is this large. Now, that is education. I'm already practicing what I am. Now, there is no school. I can beat my chest to it. There is no institution in Nigeria that does such things. I've not met one.
All right. So if I get you correctly
so
now,
what is missing, if I answer that question in primarily what is missing, most of the things we learn in school, most students cannot connect it to the society. So there is a gap between the academia and the real world.
Let's move on now. Our university producing graduates who are job ready or graduates who still need significant retraining, even for the Nigerian economy?
Yeah, so I don't know if that question is for me. I think
Yes.
Shola has probably talked about this in the answer he just provided. The quality of graduates Nigerian universities are milling out cannot function even within the Nigerian economy, and that's clear. Banks are having to train. I'm sure you worked in the bank. Banks are having to train whoever comes out of the university before they can even function. And that's why I have a friend who graduated from the Department of English in the same university and eventually worked with one of the banks in Nigeria. And he told me that banks simply had to harvest anyone who had a brain. And with a 6 months training, you're fit to work in the bank and function there. So which is instructive. I mean, it simply shows that, and that includes even those who studied in accounting, where Mr. Shola had his training. Yeah. So again, the disconnect between town and gown is a problem, and maybe to a large extent it's a global problem, but more so in Nigeria. And we could attribute a lot of reasons to this. We could talk about funding, we could talk about curriculum, the components of having to go to companies and experience how things are done. That's a curriculum issue. That's the way the whole learning experience has been structured. And I think if you really want us to drill down on this, the Nigerian education, as I begin to see it, as I now see it, it is purely transactional. I mean, people go to this university expecting to leave with some documents that allows them to apply to jobs. And unfortunately, they ain't even getting those jobs anymore. So anyways, yeah.
Anyways, I like where that ended. They ain't even getting those jobs anymore. If you've noticed, a lot of Nigerians, when they go out there, despite the disparity, despite the gap, we manage to thrive.
Yeah.
We thrive, we excel. As in, once we get a grasp on things, we're going, no stopping us. Around the world, I mean, in America alone, I don't even know the number of professors around Nigeria.
Yeah.
Literally. Now, what would you say? Is it still the resilience?
Okay.
I think it's beyond the resilience. I think it's beyond. It's the resilience is one.
That those universities, our curriculum must have left off with something. So what is it?
Now, in my view, you see, the Nigerian system has some of the basics, right? It does have some basics. Now, depending on the field you are looking at, for example, if you are looking at the medical space, Nigerian doctors are solidly prepared. Now, they might not have world-class instrument, latest instrument being used, but the basic of the theory, they have it. So when it gets somewhere out there, the performance is out of this world. Yeah. And the same thing you will notice in all aspects, because Nigerians, we're smart people. We're smart. And another thing you will notice, if you look at our system, our educational system, most Nigerian young adults started schooling at the age of 4. At the age of 4, to start reading, start learning one thing or the other. In most of these other countries, you cannot start education till you are 6 or 7. There are factors to it. You see a child that has been exposed to nursery, primary, secondary, and all of that. So that builds a level of resilience, in you, right? So you have the foundation, and the environment. It's another factor. The fact that you've been in a system that you were not very expressive, before lecturers, you are watching, you cannot talk anyhow, you cannot express your idea, before a lecturer and all of that, or something like that. That while you're in Nigeria, you get somewhere else and you're able to express, you're able to talk, and you see that the system, allows you to mentally engage, to intellectually engage. That sometimes spur that, that desire to, to do so well. I strongly believe that. Yeah.
Right.
But Adeiza, do you have any point on that?
Yeah. You have, honestly, you've done a marvelous justice to that. I think there is this, I'll call it the benefits of novelty, right? So for people who have lived in Nigeria and have had all of these deprivations, and I'll call them deprivations because the massive infrastructural supports that you begin to get when you arrive in the West is nowhere compared to what Nigeria affords. So when you come here, that novelty, as far as I'm concerned, is more than enough to put you on a path to succeed. We could talk about language. Most Nigerian students, especially international students, they have the advantage of language. Compared to other international students, Nigerians are good users of English. And this is what you need to communicate knowledge. I currently teach scholarly communications, and very few Nigerians come to my class when I teach that course. And because they don't need it. They already have the tools for accessing knowledge and communicating knowledge. But also there is a layer of contrast. If you left Nigeria, and this isn't just amongst students who arrive in the US, Canada, the UK, immigrants who arrive in the West tend to thrive and tend to succeed compared to people who were born and raised here. And there have been research and studies that look into this, because if you come to Canada, you're going to grind. You grind, and that's also why folks who arrive in these countries, they excel, and it's not just amongst Nigerians now. We talk about all the immigrants, but then the kids they give birth to do not even come anywhere close to their parents, because the parents knew the world they left behind and they put in all the effort to ensure that they make it count. But if you give birth to a child in comfort and luxury, the motivation to put in all the effort and make something out of it is not there. I think that could be playing a role amongst Nigerians who arrive in the West and who would burn midnight candles and who would study when others are not. All of this could be contributing to their unique success compared to their past.
All right, so I have this question. My producer did not include this. So here's the thing. If you were at the Minister of Education in Nigeria today, what would you take out of the system and what would you leave behind? This is going to both of you.
The curriculum, I'll change a lot of things in the curriculum. Permit me to say this. And I was watching a video, a 1-minute video recent. I think that was like 2-3 days ago. China did something spectacular. Removed about 12,000 courses off all their universities. That's the government taking a decision. And what they did was simply to say, this course that has been studied or that people study over a period of time, how many jobs have been created through it? One, then how many people are employed using this job? Have you ever seen any advert saying you should have a PhD or a BSc or BA in philosophy, for example? Have you seen anything like that? We have so many courses that are not relevant to what the government, what is happening in the society. So there should be a tweak.
Coming from you, they are coming for you. Be ready.
There should be a tweak to our system. Now, what did China do? China removed about 12,000, in languages. This course is not relevant. This course, that course is not relevant. That course, and they brought in courses related to AI, related to data analytics, and about 10,000 courses in that field was reintroduced into the system, right? So that in itself shows that the government is intentional to say, what are the courses that will be relevant in this economy, in this global economy in the next 10 years, for example? And that is the thing. I remember when my daughter was supposed to go into higher institution, one of the things we did was to sit down and we both make research to find out what courses will be relevant in the next 10 years, in the next 15 years. What courses? That is what you have to go and study. And she agreed. And that was the basis of her making it. So it's not somebody saying, go and study or go and take psychology. Because if you study psychology in Nigeria, pastors already, they've taken your job, right? How many people are consulting professional psychologists in Nigeria, for example? So, so how relevant is this? But does that mean that there is no relevance of psychology to the society? No. We might just have to tweak it. It might still be the same psychology, but we turn it around, something around mental health, that somebody is able to, we are able to align it to what the society needs, and it becomes a profession. That is one of the things. I'm so much interested in connecting, like I will use your word, Adeiza, connecting the gown to the town. It's very, very important. And that's how we can change the academic system. And it will go into both research, right? The academy must open up and integrate with the markets and the system out there.
Yeah.
Adeiza, your turn.
Thank you very much. The first thing, I could just sign on the reach of the words that you've used, Shola. That's wonderful. And the first thing is beyond the Minister of Education, right? Which is investments. Education in Nigeria is underfunded. So we need more money, but money badly spent is same as money not even spent. So of course, we can talk about Nigeria is spending very little compared to other countries of Nigeria's stature. I'm not even talking about a province like Ontario. We spent $40 billion on education in 1 year. And Ontario has roughly maybe 20 million people in total. And I don't have the exact figure now, but if Canada is about 40 million, then Ontario is the largest. So maybe even less than 20 million, spending 40 billion. And Nigeria spends about 15 billion on dollars on education, and it's just funny how much we spend. About 6% of our budgets on education, as opposed to the 15 to 20% that we should be spending. So that's one. Nigeria is averse to research. And I think that the universities should go back to getting interested in research. And I'm saying this because as we speak, I don't know of any Nigerian university that offers postdoctoral fellowships to people. Now, the only time I ever paid for study was when I was in Nigeria. I paid when I was, an undergrad, and I was at the University of Lagos for master's program, and I paid for that well, even though that was funded by a Good Samaritan. But every other degree I've had, my PhD, my postdoctoral fellowships, they were all funded. I have never had to use a cent of my own money to fund research. I was in Nigeria recently to attend a conference that it took a lot of money. I mean, it was funded by my department here. Those were things I had no access to, even as a teacher in Nigeria. I couldn't access money. And so let me say this because I don't know who is going to be listening to this. The federal government has different schemes that are meant to fund Nigerian scholars to study abroad. But we don't want to get into how those monies are allocated and who you need to be to access those monies. There are so many factors involved. So as a Minister of Education, I think they shouldn't just release this money through TED Fund or NEL Fund. They should look into how this money is spent and the quality of research they're using this money to do. You're not going to get 10 million naira to investigate something that is of no use. Back to what my colleague, Mr. Shola just mentioned. So that's another one. And we should rejig the curriculum. You talked about that very broadly. We may not, take all the courses. I understand the temptation to pivot to STEM, but what I see universities around here doing is that a course as conservative as history is being reviewed to be relevant in the AI-dominated world. And you touched on this when you mentioned psychology, which can be reviewed to become more focused on things that are of relevance to the people. I teach linguistics, and now we talk about computational linguistics, and we're working with those who are building software in AI and looking at language. So we're moving away from just language for language sake to language in domains where language is being applied. So if Nigeria can start to go back to those curriculum and rejig them to become relevant in today's world, that's something the Minister of Education can look into doing.
All right, how long do you think this will take? If we're to do this, how long? How many
okay.
years?
If I love what Adeiza mentioned, which is around research. And I was so elated to read when the Minister of Technology, Information Communication and Technology or something, this person, Bosun, the federal government earmarked, I think, about 12 billion naira, or I think 12 billion naira if I'm correct, but I think it's enough fund. And one of the things they were doing was it was directed at at various universities in Nigeria, and it was a research purpose, but that is in the area of technology and all of that, in such a way that they are supposed to come up with real life solutions that can be applied to the society.
Yeah.
Now, research is one of the key things, and I tell people that research and education is very expensive. While I was in Germany, there were offers to say, okay, you want to study, you want to do your PhD, they pay you like 3,000 euros on monthly basis. How many, I want to study, I want to do a PhD. I'm running a PhD program at the moment. I know how much I'm paying, right? If I were to be in Germany, I will be paid to do that.
Yes.
That's the thing. So you have institutions in Nigeria that they will sponsor programs that makes no sense rather than sponsoring research that will further develop the society. Because everything that you see happening abroad, sometimes we say something that, they bring that theory to Nigeria and it doesn't work because the data on which those theories were founded was not from Nigeria. It was primarily in their society. So if we make and sometimes research will finish and all you will see, you spent $10 million or whatever, and is a paper, ordinary paper. When you meet a typical Nigerian, say paper for $10 million, but that is the price, like what he's saying. See, I was trying to check. Nigeria is spending in, just about 2-point-something billion naira for us education. And it just mentioned Toronto alone is spending 40 billion. There is no way you will achieve the same thing. You can't. So we need the fund. And do we have the fund? Yes, I would say so, because it's not only something that should be dependent on the government. We have to reach out to the private sector. What are you sponsoring? What, can you, like I mentioned something, my practical example that I gave. I have lecturers that are in consulting and they bring their wealth of knowledge. They connect their organization to the school where they lecture. So there is transfer of knowledge. One way or the other, the theory, what is happening? This is happening right now. And so, imagine, I can tell you that if you take out of bankers that you have in Nigeria, if you take 100 and you put them in the banking system in Canada and in the US, before you will see 3 or 5 that will succeed in it, it will be tough, because banking there is totally different from what we do here, and that's because people will chase, deposits and all of that, check deposits, go and bring deposits and all of that. But when you get abroad, you see that banking is beyond that. It's more or less that you are relating and you understand the clients, the risk appetite, you are able to advise and say, this is what you should do, why don't you do this, and all of that.
You can't even go after debts like that. I happen to work customer service there, and when somebody is customer service in Nigeria is, in fact, I don't even want to go there.
And now you're getting back to what I mentioned about how the Nigerian system, the climate there, how it prepares you for success abroad. Because what you were saying was opening me up to another reality. When I was a student back in Nigeria, I was so used to being insulted for nothing. So you walk into a lecturer's office, and then you could just be insulted. Are you stupid? Get out. Now, when I was going to start teaching in that country, one of my commitments, in fact, it was the central commitment, was that I would respect my students and I would treat them with dignity. So I didn't know what that was, where I was going to need that. But that was just a commitment I made. And I started teaching in 2011. And I noticed something, that in my class, the students would be quiet. They would listen. And I have no recollection of insulting the students. And if you're going to make my class uncomfortable for others to learn, I would respectfully advise you to leave. So that's all. I wouldn't say, are you mad? Are you crazy? No, I wouldn't say that. But if you come anywhere close to, are you something here, that would cost you your job.
Yes.
So that would cost you your job. And I see that Nigerians who are arriving here, they finally find themselves in a system where they are humanized, where they're treated like human, where they're respected. where the system is mindful of them. They see the massive amounts of infrastructure that's been put in place for them. They see that alone is enough to drive you to succeed. And that's also why students in private universities in Nigeria are doing better than the ones in public universities.
I bet because, they are.
Yeah.
Another day, another time.
If I may chip something in around what Adeiza mentioned, I had an experience while I was in Germany, and a lecturer was supposed to be recruited. It was the first of its kind for me. And what happened? The lecturer had to come to the front of us, we students. He had to prepare and teach, and we have to assess him, and we have to write whether he should be accepted into the school or not.
That's the process.
That's it.
That's the process.
So imagine I have to decide. Students have to determine the fate of a professor.
Yeah.
Not just a professor, even in secondary schools here.
Yes.
The final level will be whether or not the students like you. So you have got to learn.
Yeah. But why isn't that happening at Nigerian universities?
High school students, getting them to listen, getting them to learn from you, the new teacher.
So why isn't that happening in Nigerian universities? Because that's an aberration. I know exactly what you're talking about. There is a day, if you're going to be hired to teach at any of the universities here, it's a very long process. You would apply, and at the end of the day, there's a short list of about, say, 20 people. There's going to be a preliminary interview. Mm-hmm. And after that interview, they would have a short list of 3 or 4 strong candidates. Those are the finalists. Each of those candidates will be invited to campus. They call it the campus visits. On that day, it's just you and you alone. Some universities would do that for 2 days. And during that time is when you meet different sets of students. You're going to meet with undergrads. And if you're going to be teaching graduate courses, you're going to meet with them. And they're going to write honest reviews about you. But another thing is this. When you eventually hired, what the students think about you determines whether you get more money, whether you get promoted or not. So
let me just quickly chip this in. Do you know that even if during the process, the students are not even allowed to write bad things about you?
Right. So that's the problem.
They're not allowed to. I mean, at some point when we were in class, we had to give a lecturer the nickname pedagogy because he said the word a lot. I bet he was nervous.
Pedagogy. Okay. Yeah. So they call it course evaluation. And when you teach a course, at the end of that course, each student will receive a link to a place where they're going to assess you on a range of parameters. They would assess the course, what the course has really taught them, what they learned, and they're going to assess you. And they will say a few things about you. Do you explain things clearly? And I mean, so knowing this constrains you and puts you in a mode that compels you to be on top of your game and make sure that the quality of what you're giving to students, and you will constantly be studying so that you have access to the contemporary wisdom in your field. Now, that isn't happening. If I'm not being assessed by students, if my job is guaranteed until 70, what's the incentive to be inventive, to be innovative, to continue to learn, to continue, even when the students also do not know what they should be getting from me? So yeah, it's a whole lot of a problem. And I'm sorry, I hope I haven't disappointed you by not offering solutions, because I believe
there are solutions.
Thank you, Mr. Shola. Let's go on.
Yeah, there are solutions to this. But the first solution will be for us to accept that we have a problem.
Yeah.
Right. So until we accept that there is a problem, we can't move forward. And one of the things is, I personally, in my view, I will tell you strongly that the problem of Nigeria is not really politicians most of the time. It is that ecosystem of civil service. So all these people you are talking about, they are in that sector. They form associations are so powerful in Nigeria, that students could suffer through, throughout the stay of, throughout their stay on campus, and they get out, and you expect them to be better citizens. It's not possible, right? I remember meeting a friend of mine who finished from my school, and we gathered to say, oh, let's try and do something. So in the process, he mentioned, oh, there is a person that finished from your school as well, and she's doing so fantastically well. Let's discuss with her. I don't know. When we met, she said, never would a dime from me get to that school, because of the experience she had while in that school. While I was in Germany, my eye opened to some things. You'll see that you are permitted to fail a course like 2-3 times before you can say, oh, that is the end for that course. Because while you're writing the exam, something must have happened. A lecturer sits you down, what was wrong? Was the question tough? Which area were you not prepared for? They try to guide you and all of that. They give you opportunity to learn, to improve before, and you rewrite without necessarily, which haunting you. Oh, network. The first thing I strongly believe, like I will take it again. One, let's know that what is the problem. Do we have a problem? Yes, we've agreed there is a problem. Now but where do we want to get to? What kind of educational system do we want to have? Because there are different styles across the globe. But what do we want to achieve? And that will premise what will be our values in these institutions, right? And when we set all of that, okay, how do we achieve that? Now, in terms of curriculum, in terms of students' treatment, in terms of the lecturers, in terms of the environment, how does the society, that is the market itself, contribute to the system? Because you are preparing people for them to use in their various businesses, whether you like it or not, and all of that. And how do we assess these issues? That is, I have set what we want to achieve. Does that mean every two years or three years, we want to gather data? That I will always need that. Everything must have data, so that that becomes the basis of the information, of the decisions that will be taken from time to time. I believe if we do that concretely, and that will not just come, that will not just come from anyone. It has to be a holistic thing. It has to be a reform that would take from the federal even down to the local government level. It's a systemic thing that I believe needs to be refurbished one way or the other.
Yeah, so in short, like a policy change, major policy change.
Major policy shift. There must be a major policy shift, right?
All right.
And the policy will not just be a policy statement. It has to be practical and drilled down to that everyone, and who do you hold responsible for this policy? We are very good at setting policy.
Oh,
but
really
when
good.
we want to implement it, how do we implement? Who and who will be implementing it, and who do you hold responsible?
For another day, another time. I mean, gentlemen, I could go on and on with you guys. I mean, it's always fun having intellectuals in the building. Oops. Thank you so much for being a part of my word. Adeiza, Isiaka, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Mr. Akinbo, we meet yet again. Thank you so much for contributing to this show and to our success again. All right, gentlemen, it's been nice hanging out with you. This is Hanging Out with Diasporans, and on Folajogo Akinlami Television. You've been brilliant. You've been amazing, and thank you so much. I appreciate it. And this is where we end the show. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Right for hanging with the Diasporans on Folajogo.
more than just certificates. It is the foundation of innovation, national development, and global competitiveness. As we've heard tonight, reforming education is not just the responsibility of the government. It requires educators, parents, industry, and every stakeholders to play their parts. My sincere thanks to Mr. Olusola Akinbo and Dr. Adeiza Isiaka for sharing their expertise, and to everyone who's joined us from all around the world today. I'm Fola Jogun Akinlami, and this has been Hanging Out with Diasporans. Join us again next week for another conversation that informs, challenges, and inspires. Until then, good night and God bless Nigeria.